At the eastern nursery corridor, a door stood ajar that should have been sealed. The security seal lay unbroken. I stopped, listening. The child's shoes were aligned by protocol, but a soft wooden toy sat beyond the threshold, out of place. No footsteps, no voices. The corridor camera blinked green, yet the feed was silent. I waited, aware that procedure required withdrawal. Instinct held me. The guard halted beneath the corridor camera, the soft hum of its housing steady and unchanged. The lens faced forward, unblinking, a black oval set into pale stone. He stood still long enough for the system to register him, then longer, counting the seconds by habit. Nothing shifted. The hallway temperature was cooler than the rest of the east wing, a result of older ventilation routed through the outer walls. It carried the faint smell of polish and something else, wood dust perhaps, from the toy he had seen earlier. He keyed into the access terminal beside the service alcove. The screen brightened with a muted glow, casting light across his gloves. His credentials cleared immediately. He navigated to the access log for the past hour, then narrowed the window to 10 minutes before and after the timestamp gap he had noticed on patrol. The entries scrolled cleanly. Too clean. No staff passes, no override flags, no emergency protocols triggered. The absence sat heavier than any red alert would have. This corridor serviced the private nursery suite. Movement here was logged twice, once by proximity badge, once by biometric confirmation at the inner door. Even cleaning crews appeared in the record, their access brief and annotated. Yet between 1612 and 1614, the system showed nothing at all, a perfect silence. He cross-checked the secondary system, same result. The guard straightened, eyes moving back down the corridor. The open door remained where it was, angled just enough to interrupt the symmetry of the wall panels. It should have closed automatically after 8 seconds. That function had been tested less than a week earlier. He remembered signing off on it himself. Protocol required immediate reporting of system faults. A technical anomaly, logged and escalated to Palace Security Engineering, would trigger a controlled lockdown of the wing. That process would take minutes, perhaps longer if authorization chains slowed it. It would also announce itself. Alarms were discreet here, but they existed. Whoever had passed through this corridor had done so quietly, intentionally. He knelt beside the toy without touching it. A small horse, carved and painted by hand, the kind gifted to young royals by visiting artisans. It had not been dropped casually. Its position, upright, facing the wall, suggested it had been set down. The guard rose and keyed his internal channel, stopping before transmitting. A fault report would absolve him of responsibility. It would also remove him from the corridor. Another unit would respond. He would not be present when questions were asked. He canceled the channel. Instead, he initiated a local diagnostic, running a silent check on the camera's internal buffer. Live feed was intact, no distortion, no lag. The skipped timestamp suggested deletion, not failure. Deletion required clearance he did not possess. His posture remained neutral as footsteps echoed faintly from the far end of the wing. Staff movement, unhurried. Normal palace rhythm continued around the breach. That too was wrong. He took one step toward the open door, then stopped. Entering without clearance would place him in violation. Remaining outside meant leaving the anomaly unresolved. The guard adjusted his gloves, a small, deliberate motion, and made his decision. He did not cross the threshold immediately. First, he positioned himself just to the side of the door, within the camera's view. ensuring his presence was recorded. Then he reached out and pressed the door inward with 2 fingers. It opened soundlessly. The hinges had been recently oiled. Inside, the corridor narrowed, leading toward the private rooms beyond. Lighting here was lower, warmer by design. The atmosphere shifted subtly, insulated from the public sections of the palace. He scanned the corners, the ceiling, the floor line where sensors were embedded beneath decorative trim. All appeared undisturbed. He stepped inside. The door slid closed behind him, sealing with a muted click. His pulse remained steady. He counted his breaths as he moved forward, each step measured to avoid unnecessary noise. Halfway down the corridor, he paused again, listening. There was no movement, but the silence was not empty. It carried a tension he could not quantify, like a room held too carefully still. At the end of the corridor stood the nursery antechamber. Its access panel was dark, awaiting input. He did not touch it. Instead, he examined the frame. A faint smudge marked the edge, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Skin oil, recent. He documented it mentally. Time, location, condition. His internal channel chimed softly, an incoming status ping from Central Security, routine and automated. He acknowledged it without comment. For now, no one was asking where he was. He turned back toward the camera he had passed earlier, imagining the missing minutes. Someone had disabled recording long enough to move through, then restored it cleanly. That level of precision narrowed the field. It suggested familiarity, not opportunism. The guard weighed his options again. If he exited now and filed a delayed report, questions would follow. Why had he entered? Why had he waited? The system would show his presence in the corridor, his access logged properly. The gap would remain unexplained. A child's soft sound reached him then. Not a cry, but the kind of uneven breath taken after one. It came from beyond the antechamber door. He moved closer, stopping just short of the panel. Protocol forbade entry without explicit authorization, but it did not forbid presence. He stood there, between spaces, listening. The sound repeated, this time quieter. He keyed his recorder, setting it to passive mode, ambient only, no images, no intrusion, just sound, time-stamped and secure. The palace remained calm around him. Somewhere above, bells marked the quarter hour. Staff continued their duties. No alarm sounded, no order came. The guard remained where he was, a fixed point in a system that had briefly failed. He understood now that the breach was not merely technical, it was personal, and whatever came next would require more than a maintenance report. He squared his shoulders, eyes on the dark panel, and waited. The access panel responded to his credentials with a soft tone that barely carried beyond the door. Clearance accepted. The nursery antechamber opened without resistance, releasing warmer air into the corridor. It smelled faintly of soap and polished wood. The lighting inside was diffused, designed to eliminate sharp edges and shadows. Every element here was intentional. He stepped in and allowed the door to seal behind him. The room was larger than most private chambers, divided into functional zones rather than walls. A low table stood near the window, its surface bare. Shelving lined one side, stocked with books and carefully arranged objects meant to appear casual. The floor covering muted sound completely. His boots made no noise. The child sat on the floor near the inner doorway, knees drawn close, hands clasped tightly around the wooden horse. The paint was chipped where small fingers had worried at it. The child's breathing was uneven but controlled, the way it becomes after crying has been forced to stop. No marks were visible from where the guard stood, no obvious injury, but the posture told its own story. Too still, too alert. The guard stopped several steps inside the room and removed his cap. He did not speak. Presence mattered more than words. The child looked up, eyes tracking the movement, then dropped again to the floor. Shoulders loosened a fraction. Protocol dictated that guards did not remain inside private royal spaces unless assigned. Their role was perimeter, not proximity. The child's personal attendants and aides were responsible for supervision. His presence inside the nursery, even now, was a violation that would not be overlooked. He moved slowly to the side, positioning himself where he could see both doors. He kept his hands visible and empty. The child shifted slightly, the movement small but deliberate, increasing the distance from the inner doorway. The sound of footsteps approached from the corridor beyond the antechamber, measured, confident. Someone was coming, unhurried. The guard did not move. Leaving now would mean abandoning the space, leaving the child alone again before answers were secured. Staying meant questions. The footsteps stopped outside, a pause, then the door opened. A senior aide entered, attire immaculate, expression composed. His gaze moved first to the guard, then to the child. Nothing in his face suggested surprise, only calculation. "This area is restricted," the aide said quietly. The guard inclined his head. "I am aware." The aide's eyes flicked briefly to the access panel, already registering the guard's credentials. "You are not assigned here." "No," the guard replied. Silence followed, measured and controlled. The aide stepped fully into the room, allowing the door to close behind him. He did not acknowledge the child directly. Instead, he adjusted his cuffs, a small gesture of order. "You may return to your post. The situation is contained." The guard did not move. His gaze remained steady, not confrontational, simply present. "The child is distressed," the aide said. The aide's mouth tightened slightly. "That is being addressed." The guard glanced once at the child, then back to the aide. "By whom?" The aide exhaled through his nose, a controlled release. "By appropriate authority." The words were precise, rehearsed, the kind used when explanations were not intended to be examined too closely. The guard's recorder continued to run in passive mode, capturing tone and cadence, the subtle pauses that mattered more than content. He did not reference it. He did not need to. "I observed an access irregularity," the guard said. "No entry was logged for this corridor during the relevant window." The aide's eyes sharpened. "Systems fail." "Twice?" the guard asked. "Across independent logs?" The aide stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are exceeding your remit." The distance between them closed to a professional minimum. The aide was not threatening. He did not need to be. Authority here was ambient, reinforced by walls and history and expectation. The guard felt its weight, familiar and heavy. The child shifted again, the wooden horse tapping softly against the floor. The sound cut through the tension. The aide's head turned sharply toward it. "Enough," he said, not loudly, but with a firmness that made the child flinch. The guard moved then, one step, not toward the aide, but subtly between him and the child. The repositioning was minimal, justified as spatial management, but the message was clear. The aide noticed, his jaw set. "You are out of position," he said. "I am ensuring safety," the guard replied. The aide's eyes flicked again to the recorder clipped at the guard's chest, then away. Behavioral guidance. The guard said nothing. He did not ask the obvious questions. He did not accuse. He simply stood, present, blocking the path with calm inevitability. The aide's tone cooled. "You will leave this room, now." The guard remained still. "I will remain until relief arrives. No relief has been assigned. Then I will remain." The silence stretched. Outside, footsteps passed, unaware. The palace continued its routine, indifferent to the small standoff contained within these walls. The aide took a step back, reassessing. His authority was real, but not absolute. Any action taken here would leave traces. He adjusted his approach. "You are placing yourself in a difficult position. There are consequences for misunderstanding procedure." The guard met his gaze. "There are consequences for unrecorded access." The aide's expression hardened, then smoothed again. "This conversation will be documented. So will mine." The child's breathing had steadied. The grip on the toy loosened. The guard noted it without looking, attuned to the smallest changes. After a moment, the aide turned away. "I will summon the appropriate party." He exited the room without another word. The door closed. The guard remained where he was, posture unchanged. He did not approach the child. He did not offer comfort beyond presence. His role was not to soothe, but to ensure the opportunity for harm had ended. Minutes passed. Each one deepened the breach. Each one confirmed that whatever had happened here was not meant to withstand scrutiny. When the access panel chimed again, signaling an incoming authority, the guard straightened slightly, ready. Protocol had already been broken. What followed would decide whether it mattered. The door opened with a controlled precision that suggested rehearsal. The aide returned, accompanied by a second figure, older, dressed in the muted formal wear reserved for senior administrative staff. Not ceremonial, not security, oversight, the kind that existed to smooth irregularities before they became records. The guard noted the timing automatically. 11 minutes since the aide had left. Enough to consult, not enough to fabricate something complex. The senior administrator did not look at the child at first. His attention went to the guard, then to the room itself, as if assessing a stage set slightly out of alignment. "You are standing inside a restricted space," the administrator said, tone even, not a question. "Yes," the guard replied. "On whose authorization?" "My own," the guard said, in response to an access anomaly. The administrator's eyes flicked briefly to the aide, then back. "Explain." The guard did so concisely. The unlogged corridor access, the timestamp gap, the open door, the child found distressed. He did not embellish. He did not speculate. He spoke in the language of reports, not arguments. The administrator listened without interruption, hands clasped behind his back. When the guard finished, he nodded once, slowly. The aide stepped forward. "There is a procedural context that has not been considered." The administrator gestured for him to continue. There was a scheduled behavioral correction, approved internally. The child was escorted briefly to a private space to reinforce boundaries. The distress observed was temporary. The guard watched the child as the aide spoke. The child's body stiffened slightly at the sound of his voice, fingers tightening again around the wooden horse. It was not dramatic. It did not need to be. The administrator followed the guard's gaze this time, then looked back to the aide. That schedule does not appear in today's brief. It was added late, the aide said smoothly. Discretion was advised. Discretion does not negate documentation, the administrator replied. The documentation exists, the aide said. It was handled offline. Offline. The word landed heavily. It implied intention. The guard spoke again. No escort was logged. No biometric confirmation. The corridor camera feed shows a deletion, not a malfunction. The aide turned to him. You are not qualified to assess system intent. I am qualified to note absence, the guard replied. The administrator raised his hand slightly, forestalling further exchange. He stepped closer to the access panel, reviewing the guard's credentials displayed there. He lingered on the timestamp. You remained inside the nursery without assignment. Yes. That is a violation. Yes. The administrator regarded him for a moment longer. Why? The guard did not answer immediately. He looked at the child, then back. Because the child was alone and distressed, and the access record was incomplete. The administrator's expression did not change, but something in his posture did, a subtle recalibration. We will need to clarify this, both of you. He turned to the aide. You will provide the offline authorization. Of course, the aide said. It can be retrieved. When? Within the hour. The administrator nodded. Until then, the guard remains. The aide's eyes widened a fraction. That is unnecessary. It is prudent, the administrator said. The aide said nothing more. His jaw tightened. The administrator addressed the guard again. You will maintain position. You will not interact with the child unless necessary for safety. Yes, the guard said. And you will prepare a preliminary account. Yes. The administrator turned and left without ceremony. The aide followed slower this time. At the door, he paused and looked back at the guard. This is not how things are done, he said quietly. The guard met his gaze. This is how they were recorded. The door closed. The room settled into a deeper quiet after their departure. The guard remained standing, his position unchanged. He did not relax. The presence of oversight did not resolve anything. It only confirmed that the matter had moved beyond routine correction. He activated his recorder to mark the transition, noting time and personnel. His voice remained level, stripped of commentary, facts only. The child shifted, moving closer to the low table, still within the guard's peripheral vision. The movement was cautious, testing. The guard adjusted his stance slightly to maintain a clear line of sight without appearing to watch, presence without pressure. Minutes passed. The palace sounds filtered faintly through the walls, distant footsteps, a closing door, the low murmur of staff conversation far removed from this room. Normality pressed in from all sides, insistent and indifferent. The aide returned alone. He carried a slim folder, unmarked. He held it carefully, as though weight mattered. He stopped just inside the doorway. "I have the authorization," he said. The guard did not respond verbally. He waited. The aide approached the table and set the folder down, opening it to reveal a single page. The guard noted the absence of signatures immediately. The formatting was correct. The language was precise. The timing was vague. "This outlines the corrective session," the aide said, "approved by delegated authority." The guard stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. He did not touch the document. "There is no timestamp," he said. It was verbal. "There is no escort listed." It was unnecessary. "There is no reason for offline handling." The aide's patience thinned. "You are dissecting a process you do not administer." "I am documenting a deviation," the guard replied. The aide leaned forward slightly. "Do you understand the implications of this?" "Yes." "Then understand this as well," the aide said quietly. "The child is not harmed. The protocol exists to serve the institution. Your insistence introduces instability." The guard considered that. Then he said, "The protocol exists to prevent unrecorded force." The aide straightened. "That is an accusation." "It is an observation," the guard said. The aide's expression hardened fully now. "You will submit your preliminary account, and it will be reviewed." "Yes." "And you will include your unauthorized presence." "Yes." The aide closed the folder and retrieved it. "Good." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For your own sake," he said, without turning, "I advise restraint." The door closed behind him. The guard remained. He completed his preliminary account methodically, documenting times, positions, statements. He did not speculate on intent. He did not describe emotions. He recorded the child's observable behavior only: posture, proximity, response to voices. When he finished, he transmitted the file to central oversight. The acknowledgment came back almost immediately. Received. The guard looked once more at the child, now seated quietly, the wooden horse resting beside them, rather than clenched. The immediate threat had passed. The larger one had not. He resumed his watch. Whatever explanation the aide provided next would need to survive what had already been written. The request came without ceremony. Central Oversight instructed him to secure any available visual data related to the access anomaly, limited to preservation, not analysis. The phrasing was deliberate. Preservation implied value. It also implied risk. The guard acknowledged and began immediately. He returned to the corridor outside the nursery under escort, not because he required it, but because presence now required witnesses. 2 guards from another unit stood at a professional distance, neutral, observant. No one spoke. The corridor looked unchanged. The door was closed now, aligned perfectly with the wall panels, as if it had never been open. He accessed the camera housing using a maintenance override he rarely used. The panel slid open with a faint release of pressure. Inside, the indicator lights glowed steady green, operational, intact. He connected his secure module and initiated a read-only extraction of the buffer. The system resisted for half a second longer than normal before yielding. That delay registered in his mind. Not a failure, a choice. The data scrolled across his display in compressed frames, each stamped and cataloged. He moved backward in time, approaching the gap. The feed did not fade or distort. It stopped. 2 minutes of absence, bracketed by normal footage on either side. He marked the segment and preserved it, noting the metadata. The deletion had been clean, leaving no corruption. Whoever had done it knew the system well enough to remove content without triggering alerts. "Copy complete," the module confirmed softly. He sealed the housing and stepped back, allowing the escorting guards to note the closure. Transparency mattered now. Back in the monitoring alcove, he reviewed the preserved segment without playing it. Viewing could be construed as interpretation. He was careful to remain within instruction. He documented the technical characteristics instead: duration of gap, absence of error flags, restoration timestamp. The evidence was silent, but its silence spoke clearly enough. The escorting guards shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the task's implications. One of them glanced toward the nursery wing, then away. The guard did not acknowledge it. When the administrator returned, he did not bring the aide. "You've preserved the data?" he asked. "Yes." "Any signs of malfunction?" "No." The administrator nodded. "Then it will be held." "For how long?" the guard asked. "As long as necessary." The administrator hesitated, then added, "You understand what this suggests?" "Yes." "It suggests intent," the administrator said. "Yes." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that word settling between them. Intent shifted responsibility. It narrowed accountability. "You will submit an addendum, technical only." "Yes." "And you will refrain from further independent action." The guard inclined his head. Understood. The administrator studied him. "You have exceeded expectation." The guard did not respond. The administrator turned to leave, then paused. "For what it is worth, this will not disappear." He left. The guard completed the addendum in the same measured tone as before. He detailed the extraction process, the system's behavior, the precise nature of the deletion. He avoided conclusions. The facts required none. Once transmitted, he was instructed to return to holding position outside the nursery. Another guard now stood inside, assigned formally, his presence logged and visible. The child was no longer alone. That mattered. The aide did not reappear. Hours passed. The palace moved through its evening cadence. Light shifted across the corridor, warming, then dimming. Staff rotations changed. The guard remained. At 1940, a notification appeared on his internal display. Request for clarification, not from central oversight, but from a higher channel. Summons pending. He acknowledged receipt. The administrator arrived again, this time with less composure. "You are to be available," he said. "A direct account has been requested." "By whom?" the guard asked. The administrator did not answer immediately. "Above my rank." That was all that needed to be said. The guard prepared his equipment, ensuring his recorder was synchronized and sealed. He reviewed his reports mentally, not for content, but for consistency. Discrepancy would be seized upon. He had left none. As he waited, he became aware of how exposed he now was. His actions, while correct in procedure, had intersected with something larger. The deletion, the offline authorization, the aide's urgency, all pointed upward. He was not naive enough to think truth alone ensured outcome, but it ensured clarity. The summons came. He was escorted through corridors he rarely walked, past rooms whose purposes were not listed on any public map. The air grew cooler, the lighting more subdued, sound dampened. They stopped before a door without insignia. "Inside," the escort said. The guard stepped forward, posture steady. Behind that door, authority waited, not operational, not administrative, but personal, royal. The matter had passed beyond correction. It had become consequence. The room he was brought into was smaller than expected. No banners, no insignia, just stone walls softened by age and a long table polished to a dull sheen. The lighting came from recessed fixtures set high, angled to avoid glare. It was designed for conversation, not ceremony. 2 people waited inside. One was the senior administrator he had already dealt with. The other sat at the head of the table, posture relaxed, hands folded, expression unreadable. Not royal by dress, but by bearing. A private secretary, perhaps, or something adjacent. The guard did not speculate. "You may stand," the figure at the table said. The guard remained where he was, feet aligned, hands at rest. His cap was under his arm. He did not remove his gloves. No one asked him to. "You have submitted multiple reports," the figure said. "Preliminary, technical, and addendum. Yes. You have also preserved restricted material. Yes." The figure nodded once. "We will address that later." The administrator spoke next. "You are aware that naming a senior aide in a formal report carries implications?" "Yes." "You were advised against it?" "Yes." The room remained quiet for several seconds. The guard did not fill it. "Explain your reasoning," the figure at the table said. The guard did not launch into justification. He recited sequence, the unlogged access, the deletion, the child's condition, the aide's presence and statements, the absence of documentation. He described what he saw, heard, and verified. He did not describe what he felt. When he finished, the figure at the table leaned back slightly. "You could have framed this as a system failure." "Yes." "You could have omitted names." "Yes." "You chose not to." "Yes." The administrator shifted. "There are internal mechanisms for resolving sensitive matters." "I engaged them," the guard said, "by filing." The figure's gaze sharpened. "You understand that this will trigger review beyond security?" "Yes." "And that review may not favor you?" "Yes." Silence again. The guard's breathing remained even. He focused on a small imperfection in the stone wall opposite him, a hairline crack repaired long ago. "You are not accused of fabrication," the figure said, "but you are accused of overreach." The guard inclined his head slightly. "I remained within observable fact." The figure regarded him for a long moment. "Why did you not leave the nursery when instructed?" The guard answered without pause. "Because the child was distressed and the explanation provided did not align with recorded access." The administrator interjected. "That is not your determination to make." "It is my determination to note," the guard replied. The figure raised a hand, ending the exchange. "The report stands," he said finally. "It will proceed." The administrator's expression tightened. "You will understand that this does not conclude the matter. It complicates it." "Yes." "You will also understand that your position becomes flexible." "Yes." The figure stood. The meeting was over. The reassignment notice arrived before he returned to his quarters. Temporary, indefinite, framed as operational necessity. He read it once and acknowledged receipt. His new post was external perimeter oversight, still within palace grounds but distant from private interiors. It was not a demotion on paper. In practice, it removed him from proximity, from influence. He reported on time. The evening air was colder outside the inner walls. Stone retained the day's chill. The sky had darkened fully now, clouds low and unmoving. He adjusted his coat and took up position, scanning by habit, even as his mind remained on what he could no longer see. Inside, processes would continue: reviews, statements, alignments. The aide would have his own account, framed carefully, supported by relationships the guard did not possess. The evidence would be examined, not for truth, but for manageability. Still, the report existed. He received a brief update through official channels 2 days later. No detail, only confirmation that the child's supervision protocols had been adjusted. That word again, adjusted. It meant someone had felt pressure. He noted it and archived the message. On the 3rd day, he saw the child. It was brief and distant, a controlled movement across an inner courtyard, supervised by attendants. The child walked steadily, no visible distress. The wooden horse was not present. That absence registered, but did not trouble him. Objects were replaceable. Safety was not. The guard remained at his post until relief arrived. He logged his shift as normal. Weather conditions, foot traffic, nothing unusual. Later that night, alone, he reviewed his actions once more, not to second guess, but to ensure alignment with duty as he understood it. Protection was not always physical. Sometimes it was procedural. Sometimes it was simply refusing to let silence stand unrecorded. He slept without difficulty. The following morning, a new summons appeared on his display. Not administrative this time. Personal. The matter was not finished. The summons specified no location, only a time and an escort designation. That omission was deliberate. The guard acknowledged and prepared without urgency. He checked his uniform for compliance, not appearance. Everything was in order. It always was. The escort arrived precisely on time. Not palace security, household detail. Older, quieter, movements economical. They exchanged no names. They walked in silence through corridors the guard had never patrolled, where the architecture shifted subtly, less ornament, more permanence. The temperature dropped by degrees, sound fell away, even footsteps seemed absorbed by the stone. They stopped before a tall door of dark wood, unmarked, guarded by no one. "You will answer directly," the escort said. "Only what is asked." "Yes," the guard replied. The door opened inward. The chamber beyond was larger than the previous room, but similarly restrained. A single long window admitted pale daylight filtered through heavy glass. A desk stood near the center, uncluttered. One man waited there. He did not rise. The guard halted at the designated distance and stood at attention. "You are the guard who filed the report," the man said. His voice was calm, unhurried, accustomed to being obeyed without emphasis. "Yes." "You understand who I am?" "Yes." "Then you understand why you are here?" "Yes." The man studied him, not as an authority assessing subordination, but as one professional measuring another. The guard felt the shift immediately. This was not a disciplinary audience. It was evaluative. "You disrupted an internal process. You did so knowingly." "Yes." "You were not ordered to intervene." "No." "You were not instructed to remain." "No." The man nodded slightly. "Yet you did." "Yes." The silence stretched. Outside the window, nothing moved. The palace at this level felt suspended. "Tell me," the man said, "what you observed." The guard delivered the account again: sequence, timing, physical positioning, recorded gaps, the child's behavior, the aide's statements. He did not add emphasis. He did not soften language. He did not remove names. When he finished, the man remained silent for several seconds. "You did not see the child struck," he said finally. "No." "You did not hear a command to harm." "No." "You cannot state intent." "No." The guard did not rush to qualify. He let the statement stand. "Yet you concluded intervention was necessary." "Yes." "On what basis?" "Risk," the guard replied. "Unrecorded access, escalating distress, use of force beyond guidance." The man leaned back slightly. "Define beyond." The grip was corrective in form, excessive in pressure and duration. It restricted movement. It caused fear. The man watched him closely. "Fear is subjective." "Yes," the guard said, "but observable." "How?" "Posture, withdrawal, compliance through stillness rather than understanding." The man considered that. His expression remained neutral, but his attention sharpened. "You chose the child over the aide." "I chose the child over ambiguity," the guard replied. The man's mouth tightened slightly, not in displeasure, in recognition. "There are expectations placed on children here," he said. "They are not raised as others are." "Yes." "They are corrected." "Yes." "They are required to obey authority early." "Yes." The guard did not argue any of it. "And yet," the man continued, "there are limits." "Yes." The man stood and moved toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Those limits are rarely tested openly." "Yes." "You forced a test." "Yes." The man turned. "Do you understand what that costs?" "Yes." "Career?" "Yes." "Access?" "Yes." "Protection?" "Yes." The man returned to his seat. "Then tell me this," he said quietly. "If the report results in nothing, no sanction, no acknowledgement, would you act the same way again?" The guard did not answer immediately. He considered the question carefully, not because it was difficult, but because it deserved precision. "Yes," he said. The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "That answer," he said, "is why this matter has not been closed." He tapped the desk lightly. "The aide has been relieved of direct involvement with the child." The guard absorbed that without reaction. "No announcement will be made," he continued. "No admission of error." "Yes." "The official record will reflect procedural review." "Yes." "But the child will not be placed alone with him again." The guard inclined his head. "Understood." "You will remain reassigned, not as punishment." "Yes." "As insulation." The guard accepted that. "There are systems here that survive because people do not force clarity. You forced it anyway." The guard remained silent. The man stood again, signaling the end. "Return to duty." "Yes." As the guard turned to leave, the man spoke once more. "Protection is not always visible, but it is remembered." The guard did not respond. He exited the chamber, posture unchanged. Outside, the escort waited. They walked back the same way, silence intact. When the guard returned to his post, nothing looked different. The palace stood as it always had, order preserved, routine intact. Only one thing had shifted. Someone had been required to answer, and somewhere inside the inner walls, a child remained safe, not because protocol allowed it, but because someone had refused to look away. The chamber was smaller than the one above rank, but heavier in purpose. No windows. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and stone, the kind of room designed to hold words that would not leave it. 3 seats faced the table. 2 were occupied when the guard entered. He recognized neither man by face, only by posture. Legal counsel, institutional review, not ceremonial, not royal. This was where contradictions were measured. He stood where indicated. "You are aware this is a closed proceeding," one of them said. "Yes." "You understand that statements made here are binding?" "Yes." The other man leaned forward slightly. "We have reviewed your reports, all of them." "Yes." They did not ask him to repeat the sequence. Instead, they began elsewhere. "You state the aide's explanation did not align with recorded schedules," the first man said. "Be specific." The guard answered precisely. "Times, locations, the absence of escort notation, the offline authorization presented after the fact. You acknowledge that certain disciplinary sessions are exempt from standard visibility," the second man said. "Yes." "And yet you challenged this one." "Yes." "Why this one?" The guard paused, not for effect, but accuracy. "Because the exemption did not include deletion of security footage." The room went quiet. "That is not explicitly stated in regulation," the first man said. "No," the guard agreed. "It is implied by necessity." The second man exchanged a glance with the first. "Explain." "Visibility is removed selectively, not retroactively. Deletion suggests concealment, not discretion." Neither man disputed that. "You also stated the aide applied force," the first man said. "Yes." "Describe it." The guard did so without embellishment. The grip, the position, the duration, the child's response. "You did not intervene immediately," the second man noted. "No." "Why?" "Assessment," the guard replied. "Escalation would have increased risk." They accepted that. "You intervened when?" "When pressure increased and verbal corrections ceased." "Did the aide resist?" "No." "Did he contest your presence?" "Yes." "How?" The guard repeated the language used. Authority invoked, procedure cited, warnings implied. The first man made a note. "You understand," he said, "that authority misuse is difficult to establish without pattern." "Yes." "And this is a single instance." "Yes." The second man closed his folder. "It is not." The guard did not react. "The aide's explanations," the man continued, "were inconsistent across accounts." The first man added, "The offline authorization could not be corroborated." Silence settled, dense and contained. "You understand what that implies," the first man said. "Yes." "The authority does not collapse publicly," the second man said, "but it collapses here." The guard inclined his head slightly. Not satisfaction, acknowledgement. The questions continued, narrowing. Not accusatory, confirmatory. The guard answered each one, aware that every response aligned another piece of the record. He did not rush. He did not defend himself. Eventually, the first man leaned back. "Your report reframed duty," he said, "from obedience to protection." The guard did not correct him. "That is a dangerous precedent," the second man said. "Yes." "But a necessary one," the first added. The guard remained still. You will not be commended, the second man said, nor censured. Yes. You will be referenced, the first said, anonymously. Yes. Your reassignment remains. Yes. The first man closed his folder. The child's supervision has been permanently restructured. The guard acknowledged that silently. This concludes our questions, the second man said. The guard turned to leave. At the door, the first man spoke again. For the record, he said, your restraint mattered as much as your action. The guard paused briefly, then inclined his head. When he returned to duty, the days passed without incident. His post remained distant, external. He observed entrances and exits, patterns and absences. The work was the same, stripped of proximity. Weeks later, during a scheduled transition, he saw the child again. It was brief. The child crossed an internal walkway accompanied by 2 attendants and another guard, younger, attentive. The child walked easily, unhurried. There was no tension in the shoulders now, no stillness born of fear. The guard watched without staring. The child did not look toward him. That was appropriate. When his shift ended, he logged out as always. No addendum, no remark. He understood now that protection did not always announce itself. Sometimes it ended quietly, absorbed back into routine, leaving only a subtle change in alignment. Protocol remained intact, but so did the line, and someone, somewhere within the palace walls, would hesitate before crossing it again.